All right, so just a few notes on radicals. You will learn more about radicals in the next chapter, chapter 4. But for right now, where we introduced in the last video perfect squares, or we reviewed perfect squares and perfect cubes, and we talked about taking the square root and the cube root, we kind of need to just touch on this for at least a little bit. So here we have the cube root of 8. So just some terminology on what each of these numbers represent. So the whole thing together, so just the cube root of 8, we just indicate as being the radical, right? So this whole thing is, whoops. This whole thing is radical. The 3 in particular, so this tiny number up here is the index. So that's the cube root, and that's called the index. And then the number underneath of the root sign is called the radicand. So then if we look at just a couple of other examples here, we have down here, there's a 4 in the index, so we have the 4th root of 81. So we didn't really talk about that in the last video, but using the same logic, we're looking for a number that when we multiply by itself 4 times, we get 81, right? So it's kind of like a 4th dimension here. So there is a button on your calculator to do that if you can't do it in your head. The answer to this is the 4th root of 81 is equal to 3. So why is that the case? Because 3 to the exponent 4 is equal to 81. So in other words, 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 is equal to 81. The next one you should be familiar with. We know that that's just the square root of 81. And we know that the square root of 81 is just equal to 9, because 9 times 9 is equal to 81. And just one small note here. Take a moment, pause the video, and what do you think is the index of the square root of 81? So what's that? There's no number. We haven't written a number where the 4 is for this. But so does that mean it's just 1? It's not just 1. It's actually a 2. So we don't typically write the 2 in the index there. The default is 2. You can write it there if you want, but typically you're not going to see a 2 written in the index.